This is the story of a young woman who vanished into the clutches of a sinister cult and her sister's desperate race to save her. Brainwashing, deadly rituals, and a locked cell hiding a horrifying secret. What really happened inside the Order of the Fox's Tooth? Stay tuned to find out. Chapter 1. Shadows and Secrets. The cafe was bathed in the warm glow of late afternoon sunlight, its wooden tables occupied by the usual hum of weekend chatter. Emily, however, was only half listening to Allan as he spoke. Her gaze lingered on his effortless confidence, the way he casually brushed a strand of his dark hair aside, the faint shadow of a smile playing on his lips. There was a mystery about him, a kind of allure that kept her intrigued, even as a faint voice in her mind whispered that she should be careful. Her phone vibrated on the table, cutting through the moment. She glanced down to see Andrea's name on the screen. With a brief apology, she opened the message. "Emily, listen to me. Stay away from Allan. Don't tell him I messaged you." Her brows knitted together in confusion as she typed back, "What's going on? Calm down. We're just having coffee." Andrea's reply was instant and insistent. "He's not who he says he is. Please come back to the dorm and I'll explain everything. Trust me." Emily sighed, glancing at Allan, who was watching her with mild curiosity. She forced a smile, replying quickly to Andrea, "Stop being so dramatic." But something about the urgency in Andrea's messages stuck with her, gnawing at the edges of her contentment. Back at the dormitory later that evening, Andrea was waiting for her, pacing the room with agitation. The moment Emily walked in, Andrea spun around, holding up her phone with a shaky hand. "Look," she said, her voice low and urgent. On the screen was an old photo, a group of people smiling at what seemed to be a secluded retreat. Among them, unmistakably, was Allan. Emily frowned. "So what? It's just a photo." Andrea's eyes were dark with worry. "He's part of a cult, Emily. A dangerous one. I know because..." She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I knew him before. He killed my friend Rita." The words hit Emily like a slap. "What? Rita? The girl in the photo on your desk, with the freckles?" Andrea nodded grimly. "Yes, that's her." Emily shook her head, her laugh brittle. "No, Andrea, you're wrong. Rita isn't dead. I just saw her. Today. She was sitting across from me. Allan introduced us." Andrea's face went pale. "That's not possible. That's not Rita." But Emily wasn't convinced. Allan didn't seem like a murderer, and Rita had been perfectly friendly. "You're being paranoid," she muttered. But deep down, unease began to stir. Later that night, against Andrea's pleas, Emily found herself stepping into the dimly lit entryway of a grand brick mansion. The place was both impressive and eerie, its white columns and towering trees casting long shadows under the pale moonlight. Allan had insisted she join him and Rita for an evening gathering at one of their friends' homes. She had agreed, driven partly by curiosity, partly by defiance of Andrea's warnings. Inside, the air was heavy with an unnatural silence. Emily's eyes darted around, taking in the meticulously decorated interior. But something about the place felt off. The company Allan had mentioned turned out to be a small group of people seated on the terrace, their faces blank, their silence oppressive. "They're praying," Allan explained with an easy smile. But the sight unsettled Emily. Who prays like that? As the evening wore on, Allan and Rita excused themselves to fetch drinks, leaving Emily alone in the grand living room. Her eyes wandered, curiosity pulling her deeper into the house. She wandered down a long hallway, the faint hum of her curiosity growing louder with each step. At the end of the corridor, she stopped. A steel door stood before her, its surface cold and unyielding, secured with a heavy padlock. Emily's breath caught as a muffled sound reached her ears. She pressed her ear to the door. Someone was crying on the other side, soft, broken sobs that sent chills down her spine. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. It was Andrea. "Please, Emily, get out of there." Emily's hands trembled as she typed back. "I can't. The gates are locked. The fence is high, and they're coming." The message sent, she pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. Moments later, she peeked around the corner and saw them. Allan and Rita, leading a thin, frail girl down the corridor. The girl stumbled, her movements sluggish, her head bowed. Emily froze, her breath catching. The girl's face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, her frame skeletal. It was as if she hadn't eaten in days. But what made Emily's blood run cold wasn't just her condition. It was her face. Emily's fingers gripped the edge of the wall as realization struck her like a thunderclap. That face. She knew that face. The girl wasn't a stranger. She was someone Andrea cared deeply about. It was Kate, Andrea's sister. Chapter 2. The Depths of Devotion. Night weighed heavily on Emily as she lay on the narrow cot in the dimly lit room assigned to her. The events of the day churned in her mind relentlessly. Kate's hollow eyes and gaunt frame were impossible to forget. That wasn't the vibrant, lively girl Emily remembered seeing in old photographs. This was someone broken, someone changed. The low buzz of her phone pulled her from her thoughts. It was Andrea, pleading once again for Emily to act. She begged her to convince Kate to escape the mansion, to flee before it was too late. Andrea's fear radiated through her words, but Emily hesitated. She already sensed that Kate wouldn't leave willingly. Whatever Allan and his followers had done to her, it had rooted itself too deeply. Emily recalled the unsettling scene from the previous night, the steel door, the muffled sobs, and the figure she had glimpsed being led away. She typed back to Andrea, describing the fragmented whispers she'd heard from Kate. There was one word repeated over and over: mea culpa. The term was foreign, yet it carried an unmistakable weight, as though it was laced with guilt or shame. Andrea suggested that it was likely the result of brainwashing, a tactic to instill obedience in their followers. But there was a heavier question looming. Should they tell Kate's mother? Andrea quickly dismissed the idea, fearing it would shatter what little resolve her mother had left after her father's passing. Emily felt the weight of the situation deepen. Telling the authorities seemed futile too. Kate was legally an adult and appeared to have come to this place willingly. Emily's thoughts were interrupted by the dawning realization that Rita might hold some answers. However, Andrea shot down that idea as well. Rita, she explained, had likely faked her own death to sever ties with everyone who had once cared about her. If she was willing to go to such lengths, her loyalty to Allan's cult was likely unshakable. Rita wouldn't help them. The mansion seemed to press its eerie stillness around Emily as she resolved to stay. Allan had grown increasingly suspicious of her presence, and Emily knew she had to tread carefully. Feigning interest in the cult became her new strategy. If she could gain Allan's trust, perhaps she could uncover the means to free Kate. Even as fear churned in her stomach, Emily decided to play along, pretending to be curious and vulnerable. It would buy her time to speak with Kate and understand what had truly happened to her. The following morning, Emily found an opportunity to get Kate alone. Under the pretense of needing help in the bathroom, she cornered her. But as Kate stood before her, Emily's heart broke. There was no spark of recognition. Kate's eyes passed over her as if she were a stranger. Desperately, Emily tried to reintroduce herself, mentioning Andrea's name and their shared connection. But Kate's focus was elsewhere. She spoke mechanically about the cult, revealing its name, the Order of the Fox's Tooth. Emily noticed for the first time the small fox tooth pendant hanging from a cord around Kate's neck. The significance of the ornament was unclear, but its presence unsettled her. Breakfast interrupted their brief encounter. A loud bell rang through the mansion, summoning everyone to the dining hall. The rigid schedule left little room for deviation, and Kate quickly excused herself, muttering something about breaking the rules. Emily watched her retreat, the weight of the vow of silence Kate mentioned pressing heavily on her. Emily was struck by how fearful and hesitant Kate had become, as though even small acts of disobedience carried grave consequences. Later, Emily relayed her discoveries to Andrea. Their quiet digital exchange carried an undertone of urgency. Emily described the sparse meals, porridge for breakfast, salad for dinner, and revealed the harrowing truth Kate had shared. The cult's initiation, referred to as breaking, involved days of isolation, hunger, and darkness. Recruits were locked in steel cells with only water and a bucket. For the first 24 hours, 3 cult members would berate them incessantly, breaking their spirit. Then came 6 days of complete solitude. Andrea couldn't believe it. Emily explained the peculiar test of loyalty, a button inside the cell, which lit up red for 5 minutes every morning. Pressing it meant an escape from the torment, but also signified failure. Those who endured all 7 days were deemed worthy. The absurdity of it all weighed heavily on both of them. Emily couldn't comprehend why anyone would willingly subject themselves to such cruelty. She recounted Kate's explanation. The cult promised salvation in an apocalyptic future. Only the members of the Order would survive and inherit the new world to come. Their indoctrination was slow, methodical, and disturbingly effective. As the day progressed, Emily found herself drawn deeper into the mansion's oppressive atmosphere. She scribbled a note to Kate, pretending to seek guidance on the breaking process, hoping to gain more insight. Kate, perhaps seeing a glimmer of shared interest, responded with chilling detail. She described the relentless psychological pressure of the first day, followed by the deafening silence of solitary confinement. Emily's heart ached at the thought of what Kate had endured. The most haunting revelation came later. That evening, Emily learned about the final initiation ritual. It was called cleansing. Participants were taken to a nearby forest lake, where they were submerged underwater. Allan, acting as the leader, held them under until they were deemed clean. That night, tragedy struck. Linda, a new recruit preparing for her cleansing, didn't survive. Allan explained to the group that her resistance during the ritual indicated impurity, a sign she wasn't ready. His cold detachment sent a shiver through Emily. Linda's death wasn't an accident. It was murder, thinly veiled by the cult's twisted ideology. Emily's resolve hardened as she stared at Kate's pale face across the room. The clock was ticking. If she didn't act soon, Kate could be next. Watch part 2 of this story on my channel.